Well, my name is Dale Tanner. I am the vocalist of a band called Ocean Grove. We are I guess you could call a new metal-ish band. If you have a listen, you'll understand why it's a bit hard to describe. We call it odd world music, so that's our brand of music.
So how did it start for you?
It started in high school. Luke and I were in 1 year level. Matt and Jimmy were in the year level below.
Yeah.
Heavy music wasn't really that popular in that area as just a genre of music that people listen to. So I found it a little isolating when I was sort of first coming up through school. My brother Ryan, who's 9 years older than me, he got me into a lot of heavy music, you know, Metallica, Korn, Limp Bizkit. And so I had access to all his CD collection from the age of like 5 because we shared a bedroom together. So it was inevitable that that style of music was always going to be like with me. And when I began at St. Bede's in Mentone, I was kind of shocked to find that I was a bit of an outsider and there weren't actually that many other people that were sort of into this style of music and this culture. And so that was kind of one of the beautiful things that brought the band together in the first place, was the fact that we were all a little bit isolated in that love for heavy music. My cousin Beau, 3 years older than me, he was kind of like my brother, and he listened to music like Blink-182 and, you know, Pennywise and all these kind of more skate, and he skated and he played basketball. And one year he got this guitar, and I vividly remember walking in his bedroom. He's like, "I got something to show you," and he like had this electric guitar with like a little starter like amp. And I was like, "Oh my God, you can own a guitar?" You know, I just hadn't thought about that concept. I was like, I've only seen rock stars on TV like have guitars. Like I didn't know people could just own them. He's like, "I'm no good at this. Like, do you want the guitar?" And I was like, "Oh, absolutely." So that was like the entry point of like an instrument for me. Fast forward to like we're in year 9. These 2 kids that I've never met before come up to me and they're like, "Hey, you Dale?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "Oh, do you wanna be in our band?" Literally as simple as that. I'm like, it's kind of like, "Oh yeah, okay." Little did I know that 13 years down the track, 14 years, I'd still be, like my whole life would be all come down to that. I knew that it had a lot of promise, especially everyone that was in the band all brought something very unique, and we're all such talented musicians. The way that our minds intersect, coming from such different places and angles, just created this very experimental, very fun brand of music that pretty much from the get-go like attracted an audience. Having people say stuff like, "Oh, I've never really heard anything like this before," and stuff like that, you're like, "Oh, maybe there is something more to this, more beyond just we're just mucking around and having a bit of fun." Like people actually like kind of care. Going through, lockdown and everything, that was just, there was so much more pressure to sort of stay relevant and to make it work. So like it forced me to think outside the box and not just do the standard, you go on tour, you play the shows, you get off tour, you write an album, and that's how bands have done it for 40 years. Yeah. But all of a sudden that put a scenario into place where it was like, "Oh, well, you can't do that." Everyone had the chance to sort of, plead their case and kind of complain about how this was affecting their livelihood. And I feel like musicians and the arts was sort of the first industry to kind of get snubbed, and everyone was okay with that because it was like, well, it was non-essential, this word of non-essential getting thrown around, and that is such a head fuck. My society's telling me that like what I'm pursuing like isn't essential and like isn't, when push comes to shove, like doesn't really matter. The album that we released in that time, since we've gone on tour, so many people have been like, "Oh my God, like, that album or that song, like, was just my COVID go-to. Like, I'd go on walks and I'd put that album on or go for a run or something, and like, it was my outlet. Like, thank you so much for like creating that, because it was like a glimmer of positivity or hope amidst all the chaos." Support Act was a really great organisation that was just like, for me, that was the first time witnessing firsthand like how they could be there, because I'd known of them for a couple of years before that, and then I actually came to sort of rely on their support when times did actually get tough financially, mental health wise. That they were kind of the first organisation that I felt I could actually call upon. We don't we don't have too much else going for us in terms of outside support. Sure, there's government grants and things that get thrown around, but for the most part, it's like you're in this alone. Like you're gonna pursue this. Like you're going in the deep end.
So I want to pivot a little bit to ask you about your mental health. Is there anything you want to share about mental health in general?
Definitely. Yeah, last year was like my lowest year ever. You know, like my mind, it does some funny things sometimes, but it's never led me down a path of, you know, feeling anxious or depressed. Being in Melbourne during lockdown was really hard on everybody. We weren't able to make money. We weren't able to go outside. It was just so intense. Like you could not escape it. It was on the news every day, every conversation. I mean, we all know it, we all experienced it. But in Melbourne, it was so flared up that like I don't know, I was fed up and I didn't know how to kind of like escape it. There was no escape. And then I got COVID for the first time. So I got sick and then I just crashed. Like everything just came tumbling down. It was like I'd hit my like boiling point. So the next month I just felt lethargic and really just like run down, and I didn't feel myself. I fell into like major depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and that's all new, all at once. I'm just like totally cycling on thoughts that I can't stop. Like it manifested into physically walking in circles in my room, because that's what my head was doing. I was just going through these thoughts of, a lot of it was shame and guilt about feeling the way that I did, shame and guilt about the decision to move to Sydney and leaving my friends and my family and my band behind, and that potentially being the wrong decision. I mean, there was a few days, you know, and there was one conversation I had with Luke where I was like, you know, he was like, what type of thoughts are you having? And I'm like, yeah, you know, there's literally thoughts where I feel like I'm a danger to myself, because like I'm walking along a pathway and my mind's telling me like, you could easily throw yourself in front of that car, you know, like, you know, there's this sever and your mind feels like it's this separate entity that you can't, I felt like I couldn't control. And this spiraling of thoughts, this phenomenon was just something that was the part that I got so terrified about, was thinking, if I have to sort of kind of go through this and have these thoughts every day, like for the rest of my life, like not knowing if there's a way out, like it was a really, really scary prospect, because it was so different to life as I'd known it. And I feel so grateful to have had the support network that I did. I mentioned Support Act, but you know, my beautiful partner Jen and my great friendship circles and my family, of course, were there. And you know, really, I feel really grateful having experienced this, because anytime someone brings up, you know, depression or anxiety or suicidal thoughts, anything like this, like I'm sure I've only just scraped the surface. There's so much, and there's so many different worlds that people are experiencing out there that I at least feel like I can talk about it and not feel like a phony. It gives me now the strength and the opportunity to speak openly about it in a way that I think will help. And I think that's a really cool thing.